In the heart of the American Midwest lies Nebraska, a landlocked state defined by open skies, sweeping plains, and a rugged frontier spirit. Bordered by South Dakota to the north, Iowa and Missouri to the east across the mighty Missouri River, Kansas to the south, Colorado to the southwest, and Wyoming to the west, Nebraska sits at the crossroads of America's Great Plains. Spanning more than 77,000 square miles, it is the nation's 16th largest state. Yet with just over 2 million residents, Nebraska remains among the least densely populated, a place where wide horizons often outnumber city skylines. Its capital, Lincoln, anchors the state politically, while Omaha, its largest city, perched on the Missouri River, serves as a hub of commerce and culture. Admitted to the Union in 1867, only 2 years after the Civil War, Nebraska holds a unique place in American democracy. Its legislature stands alone as the country's only unicameral and officially nonpartisan governing body. And unlike most of the nation, Nebraska is one of just 2 states that divides its electoral college votes by congressional district, rather than granting them all to a single candidate. From its history on the frontier to its modern role in shaping America's politics and identity, Nebraska remains a state both distinctive and deeply tied to the story of the United States. Nebraska's landscape is shaped by 2 distinct regions. To the east, the dissected Till Plains, a land of gently rolling hills, cradle the state's largest cities, Omaha and Lincoln. Life thrives here, where fertile ground meets bustling communities. Stretching westward, the vast Great Plains dominate most of Nebraska, a sea of treeless prairie that seems to touch the horizon. Here, the land tells the story of endurance, where open skies meet rugged soil. Climate divides the state as clearly as its geography. Eastern Nebraska experiences a humid continental climate, 4 distinct seasons with dramatic swings between summer heat and winter chill. Farther west, semi-arid conditions prevail, where rainfall is scarce and the prairie relies on resilience. But nature here is powerful. Spring and summer often bring violent thunderstorms, some spiraling into tornadoes that carve across the plains. Even autumn can stir sudden tempests. And yet, Nebraska also knows gentler winds. The Chinook, rolling down from the Rocky Mountains, can sweep across the plains in winter and early spring, bringing sudden warmth to a land gripped by cold. This is Nebraska, a land of contrasts, shaped by the forces of nature, and defined by the balance between resilience and renewal. Long before Nebraska bore its name, this land was home to indigenous nations: the Omaha, the Missouri, the Ponca, the Pawnee, the Oto, and the Lakota Sioux. For thousands of years, they shaped their lives in harmony with the rivers, the prairies, and the boundless skies of the Great Plains. Centuries later, the region became a vital crossroads of American exploration. The Lewis and Clark expedition carved a path through these lands, leaving behind trails that still echo with history. With the arrival of the Transcontinental Railroad and the promise of the Homestead Acts, a new wave of settlers poured into Nebraska in the 1870s and 1880s. Farms spread across the prairie, towns rose from the plains, and the foundation of Nebraska's powerful agricultural identity was born, a legacy that continues to define the state today. The very name, Nebraska, carries the story of its land and its people. Derived from the words of the Oto and Omaha nations, Niobrara and Nebraska, it translates to flat water. The name honors the Platte River, a wide, shallow ribbon of water that winds across the state, shaping both its geography and its identity. From this river, Nebraska draws not just its name, but a reflection of the land itself, vast, open, and enduring. For thousands of years before European colonization, the land we now call Nebraska was home to indigenous nations: the Omaha, the Missouri, the Ponca, the Pawnee, the Oto, and branches of the Lakota Sioux, some of whom migrated westward into this region. Their histories were deeply rooted in the rivers, plains, and skies of the Great Plains. By the late 17th century, a new chapter began, as European powers turned their eyes toward the region. Spain reached into the west, forging trade ties with the Apache in the 1690s. France soon followed, building commerce along the Missouri River, and by 1719 had signed treaties with several tribes. But European rivalry spilled onto the plains. In 1720, Spain sent an armed expedition under Lieutenant General Pedro de Villesa. Near present-day Columbus, The party was ambushed by a coalition of Pawnee and Oto warriors allied with the French. The Villisca expedition was destroyed, and with it ended Spanish exploration of Nebraska for the rest of the century. As empires shifted, so too did control of the land. In 1762, during the 7 Years' War, France ceded the Louisiana Territory to Spain, setting Britain and Spain into competition along the Mississippi. By 1773, British traders had already established ties with native peoples in Nebraska. Spain pressed back, dispatching expeditions up the Missouri River in the 1790s. One of these, led by James Mackay in 1795, founded Nebraska's first European settlement near the mouth of the Platte River. That same year, his party constructed a small outpost, Fort Carlos IV, near what is now Homer, marking Spain's most lasting imprint on the region. In 1819, the United States planted its first military outpost west of the Missouri River, Fort Atkinson, just east of today's Fort Calhoun. For less than a decade it stood as a lonely symbol of expansion, before being abandoned in 1827 as migration pressed ever farther west. Settlement remained sparse until the mid-19th century. Then came the California gold rush of 1848, pulling thousands across the plains. Just a few years later, on May 30, 1854, Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, carving new territories along the 40th parallel. The Nebraska Territory once stretched far beyond its modern borders, reaching into what would become Colorado, the Dakotas, Wyoming, and Montana. Its capital, Omaha. The 1860s brought dramatic change. Native tribes were forced from their ancestral lands onto reservations, opening vast stretches of prairie to new settlers. Under the promise of the Homestead Act, thousands arrived to claim free land. With so few trees on the open plains, many built sod houses, as the Omaha and other native peoples had before them. In time, the population grew large enough to seek statehood. On March 1, 1867, Nebraska entered the Union as the 37th state. Its capital was moved from Omaha to Lancaster, renamed Lincoln in honor of the recently assassinated president. Just 6 years later, in 1873, the Pawnee and Sioux clashed in the Battle of Massacre Canyon, the last major native battle fought on Nebraska soil. Music rises with strings and percussion. The 1870s and 1880s brought explosive growth. The prairies proved perfect for cattle grazing, while new technologies, barbed wire, windmills, and the steel plow, gave settlers the tools to tame the land. Favorable weather turned Nebraska into an agricultural powerhouse. By the 1880s, the population had surged past 450,000. It was here, too, that Arbor Day was born. In Nebraska City, Territorial Governor J. Sterling Morton called on citizens to plant trees across the bare prairies, a tradition that spread across the nation and endures to this day. As the century closed, a new wave of migration reshaped Nebraska. African Americans, leaving the segregated South during the Great Migration, found opportunities in Omaha's rail yards, packing houses, and factories. But with new opportunities came new struggles, discrimination from both long-settled residents and recent European immigrants competing for the same jobs. Out of these struggles grew a powerful current of civil rights activism, centered in Omaha, that would echo through generations. In 1912, African Americans in Omaha organized one of the nation's earliest chapters of the NAACP, determined to fight for equality and justice in both the city and the state. Yet, just 7 years later, Omaha was shaken by racial violence. In 1919, amid nationwide unrest, the Omaha race riots erupted, fueled by racial tensions and the accusation of a black man for the assault of a white woman. The violence scarred the city, leaving behind deep divisions. The following decades brought new trials. The Great Depression of the 1930s struck Nebraska hard. Between 1930 and 1936, relentless drought and destructive farming practices gave rise to the Dust Bowl. Winds swept away the fertile topsoil, leaving behind parched earth and forcing many families to abandon their farms in search of survival. But out of hardship came innovation. In 1934, Nebraska voters approved a bold initiative to reshape their government into the nation's only unicameral legislature. 3 years later, in 1937, the first session of this unique body convened, redefining the state's politics forever. And in 1986, Nebraska made history again. Voters elected Kay Orr as the state's first female governor, a milestone in the ongoing story of progress and resilience on the Great Plains. Nebraska sits at the heart of the Great Plains, bordered by 6 states: South Dakota to the north, Iowa and Missouri to the east across the Missouri River, Kansas to the south, Colorado to the southwest, and Wyoming to the west. It is a crossroads of the American Midwest and West, shaped by wide horizons and flowing waters. The state is divided into 93 counties and spans 2 time zones. Most of Nebraska lives by Central Time, while the far western panhandle keeps to Mountain Time, a reminder of the state's vast reach across the plains. 3 great rivers carve their way from west to east, lifelines that have defined Nebraska for centuries. The Platte River, born from the union of the North Platte and South Platte, flows through the center of the state, broad and shallow, mirroring the very name Nebraska, flat water. To the north, the Niobrara winds through bluffs and prairies, while to the south, the Republican River crosses fertile farmland. Together, these rivers nourish the land, carrying the story of Nebraska across time and terrain. When Nebraska first drafted its constitution in 1866, the state's boundaries were laid out in meticulous detail, a vision of a new state carved into the heart of the Great Plains. The line began where Missouri meets the 40th parallel, stretching westward across open prairie to the 25th meridian west of Washington. From there it turned north, tracing the 41st parallel and beyond, cutting into the high plains. At the 27th meridian, the boundary climbed north once more to the 43rd degree of latitude, marking the edge of what would become Nebraska's panhandle. From there, the line was drawn east, following the Kia-Paha River and then the Niobrara, their winding channels forming the northern boundary. Finally, the Missouri River, broad, powerful, and constant, carried the border back to its beginning. Though the description has since shifted, with today's northern boundary extending directly east along the 43rd parallel to the Missouri, the words of Nebraska's first constitution remain a lasting map of how the state first defined itself, a place marked by rivers, parallels, and the vastness of the American frontier.